Welcome back to WagerTalk TV. It's Sweet 16. We're not going to give you a pick in this video. We're going to try to help you pick some winners yourself and give you some betting tips for the round of the Sweet 16. I'm joined with my partners in crime. And if we're talking about anything with stats and anything at WagerTalk, this is the guy that's usually sending it out and creating it.
I prefer talking TNA normally with Kelly, but now that you're here, it makes it a little uncomfortable.
More than a little, especially since I'm standing between you
this
guys.
would be like a present you on one of your podcasts.
So you're going to say that after this week, we're heading to Florida this weekend and we're sharing a condo on the weekend, and you don't want to do TNA with me. Okay, I see that. But that is Ralph Michaels at Cal Sports at
TMI all the way.
Yeah, okay.
What the hell is that about?
I need to know about your hotel room plans in Sarasota.
Yeah. It's a two-bedroom condo. Don't worry about it.
Sure.
We're good.
Sure.
Teddy, this is Teddy Covers. Teddy_Covers. You can find him on Twitter. Some of the tips we talked about last week, I want to ask you one, if it carries over to this week or if it's less of a factor. And we pointed out that whenever you're playing that first round game, the first game, the Thursday-Friday games, coaching is a little bit negated because you have extra time for, say, the underdog coach to prepare his game plan. But the better coaches, we said it was an advantage going to the short turnaround from the Thursday to Saturday. They've been through it. They're better. They understand how to do a game plan quicker. Do you have that same advantage in this round because those coaches that maybe didn't have that experience now do? They got through the first two games.
Well, they might have some tournament experience, but that doesn't mean they have the experience of handling. Sweet 16 is a whole different animal. You return back to campus, and if you're not used to that pressure, you're not used to that spotlight, it's enormous. And a coach who's been in these spots before has a big advantage over a coach that doesn't. That being said, when we're looking at this year's Sweet 16, it's all chalk and a whole lot of experienced coaches. There's not a lot of bet against guys to look at for a matchup where, in general, you want to be betting against the weaker coaches.
Teddy, I have a question for you then.
Shoot.
Obviously, the one scenario is Michigan State LSU. How much is that coaching edge difference?
I think it's enormous.
Izzo against an interim.
I think
2, 3, 4 points?
I think it's worth as much as the point spread is worth.
Okay.
And
I agree.
Would only take Michigan State in that game.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ralph, last week we saw in the second round the favorites straight up, 16-0. A lot of brackets still alive for people when that happens.
People all of a sudden find out they're in 96th place and they have everyone left in the bracket. What's going on? Well, when it's chalk like it is, it's everyone's in alive.
It was 11-5 against the number, and that's all we concern ourselves with. Do you see any bias with the betting public now after they saw favorites coming in last week? Will we see a rush, and will we see some of these big-name favorites, the lines bumping up as we get close to game day?
Well, the unique thing now is we know that every line is going to be 8 or less from here on in. There's not going to be a situation where we have big lines. So you all of a sudden start closing the gap between the teams. Coaching starts becoming more important when you have two teams equal. Who turns the ball over less, who's in those pressure situations. One thing I want to talk about different in the Sweet 16 than the first rounds is the dynamics are so different in the first two rounds. Some teams, their goal is to get to the Elite 8 or Sweet 16. They know they're going to get past the first round, and those big favorites often don't cover because of that. And then you also have situations like Michigan State. They beat Minnesota by 20, but Izzo was just livid. They turned the ball over 22 times. And they only turned the ball over 20 times, 3 times this year. And what did he say? He said, we played our 5th game in 9 days. They were through a brutal stretch. LSU had only played, LSU, for example, only played 3 games in that stretch. Now, all that rest factor is back to equal with teams having played, traveled home, and coming back. Now with the pods, though, we do have some situations where teams are on 4-day rest versus 5-day rest. And I looked this up this morning, and there's not many situations, but surprisingly, the team that has 4 days rest versus the team that has 5, the less rest is actually 12-5-1 ATS since 2011. So, once you have 4 days rest, does it matter 4 or 5? Well, no. And the teams that are in that situation, Tennessee, Texas Tech, North Carolina, and Houston, those are the teams that played Sunday relative to their opponent playing Saturday.
Teddy, last thing I'll throw to you, and it's something we always preach, you and I say the same thing with this one. I always say no team's as good as their best game, or are they as bad as their worst game. You say don't overreact to what you just saw. We saw some blowouts last week, obviously, with these favorites. Give your opinion to the fans what they should do with those games.
Well, you want to be careful of having too much of a recency bias. In terms of what you saw last is not necessarily what you're going to see next. And boy, that was on full display in the round of 32, where all these teams that looked awful and barely survived in advance covered, and the teams that looked great didn't necessarily cover. That happened a lot over the course of the weekend. I would expect that to continue in the Sweet 16 and then even in the Elite 8. It's one of these deals, if a team's covered a couple in a row, be wary. And if a team hasn't covered and has managed to survive in advance, those often are value-laden squads as the tournament progresses.
Ralph, I'll close it with you before we send it home.
Two things I want to bring up, some numbers I ran. Again, I was just looking for information. And both of these are after game one, so they do not include the first March Madness game. You've got that game on your belt where you're playing a 16 seed or you're a huge favorite. But if after game one you scored 82 or more points in your last game and you're a dog this game, it means you were probably in a higher scoring game. You are 16, 33, and 3 against the spread, 32.7%. That would mean to fade Florida State, Purdue, and Auburn. If, after the first March Madness game, you scored 63 points or less and won, obviously because you advanced, you won, you're 26 and 13, 66.7%. That would be Kentucky and Virginia. So, are you going to base a play on just scoring on what you did last game? No, but the thought process is there. Well, if we scored 63 points and won, we're a pretty good defensive team. We held someone to under 62 points. And likewise, if you're 80 points, you're probably running up and down that court, and who knows what the reason is exactly. But 32.7% with 50 games under the belt since 2011, that is. Some numbers to at least look at and think about if you're making plays on those games.
All right, great stuff, guys. We're going to head it home here. Sports Memo Text Club. We told you about the WagerTalk Text Club. Well, we have one for Sports Memo. Just text Sports Memo to 33222. You'll get a $10 welcome bonus for signing up. Plus, you will get free picks and Text Club exclusive only offers. Just send to Sports Memo and use Text Club 33222. Guys, also, you like these videos, do us a favor. We're closing in on 20,000 subscribers. If we hit 20,000 subscribers, not if, when we hit 20,000 subscribers, we will give everybody a $20 thank you coupon. You'll be able to use it both at WagerTalk and Sports Memo. Check it out. Go to our YouTube channel right here, click the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel. And hit the old bell right there. That'll send you the notices. You'll know the minute we post a video. We'll be back with more here at WagerTalk.com.